Most national reporters covered this case from a studio. They flew in, did their segment, and flew home. Brian Entin did not do that. Brian Entin went to Tucson. He knocked on doors. He walked the perimeter behind Nancy's house. He flew drone footage over the neighborhood. He sat in the heat and waited for anything that moved in that quiet corner of the Catalina foothills. And he kept going back. By day 66 of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, Entin had become something close to a fixture in that community, the kind of reporter neighbors actually opened their doors for, because they had seen him out there, because they knew he was not going anywhere. And on day 66, a woman named Laura Gargano opened hers. What Laura told Brian Entin on camera under her own name on record has not gotten the attention it deserves, because what she described was not a feeling, it was not a rumor, it was something she personally observed with a specific location, a specific pattern, and a timeline that lands in the exact window investigators care about most. There is a rental property near Nancy Guthrie's home, and in the days around February 1st, the car was gone. The property went quiet. Someone had left. That observation does not stand alone, and by the time this video is over, you are going to understand exactly why it matters, and exactly why a separate FBI source told Brian Entin something that connects directly to what Laura described. Quick sourcing note. Brian Entin's on-the-ground reporting is sourced from his News Nation Day 66 coverage, all attributed throughout. Laura Gargano is a named, on-camera, on-record source. Her words are her own and clearly labeled as such. Bob Kryger's analysis is named and on record. Entin's FBI-adjacent source is unnamed and described as single source. I will flag it explicitly when we get there. No individual in this video is named or implied as a suspect. Those are the standards. Let's follow the evidence. Before we go into the rental property and the investigation threads, I need to stop. Because behind every lead and every neighbor's account and every investigative inference in this video, there is a person. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is a mother, a grandmother, a woman of habit and structure who built a life in the Catalina foothills and called it home. A woman who went to dinner with her family on January 31st, came back to that home, and was taken from it in the night. 66 days.
If you are a person of faith, please say a prayer for Nancy Guthrie right now. Pray that she is found. Pray that she is safe. Pray that the person who knows what happened in that neighborhood finds the conscience to come forward. Amen. I want you to type Amen. And if prayer is not your practice, hold her in your thoughts, because every thread we follow in this video exists for one reason: to bring her home. Now, for a moment, I want to speak directly to you. Tell me where you're watching from, because right now, this story isn't just being heard in one place, it's reaching people across the world, from the United States to the UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond. People who follow cases like this, cases where justice took years, where families refused to give up, where the truth almost disappeared. And here's the truth most people don't realize. This channel is still small, which means every single viewer matters. Every like, every comment, every subscribe is what tells the algorithm this story deserves to be seen. So if you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, hit subscribe, because the more people who see this, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay buried. Please, right now, subscribe to Evidence True Crime TV. Hit the like button. It takes 5 seconds, and stay for the question at the end of this video. I genuinely want your answer. And in about 60 seconds, I am going to start walking you through what Laura Gargano observed on the ground. But before I do, you need to understand why this neighborhood is different from most, and why the absence of something can speak louder than evidence. Stay with me. Let's talk about where Nancy Guthrie lives, because the neighborhood context is not incidental to this story, it is central to it. The Catalina Foothills is a residential area north of Tucson, nestled against the Santa Catalina Mountains. It is an affluent, established community. Homes are not packed together. There is space, there is privacy, there is a general expectation of knowing, if not always personally, then at least by presence, who belongs on your street. You notice unfamiliar cars. You notice when something changes. You notice because the rhythms of your immediate environment are familiar and departures from those rhythms register. This is not a neighborhood where rental properties are common. Laura Gargano made that point explicitly in her interview with Brian Entin. Her words, "There are not that many rentals around here, but there is a rental nearby." That matters because it shapes the entire significance of what she observed. In an apartment complex or a high-turnover neighborhood, the departure of a tenant would be unremarkable. It would not register. A neighbor would not feel compelled to mention it to a national investigative reporter on camera. But the Catalina Foothills is not that. It is the kind of neighborhood where a rental property stands out, where the residents of a rental property stand out, where their presence and their absence gets noticed. Nancy Guthrie lived in this neighborhood. She was embedded in it. Her daughter described her daily routines as consistent and anchored to her home. She was 84 years old, a woman of habit, of structure. The sheriff's word for what happened to her was targeted, not random. Someone chose Nancy Guthrie specifically. Someone knew where she lived. Someone knew her routine. Someone knew when and how to move. And Laura Gargano, who also knows this neighborhood and its rhythms because she lives there, noticed something in the days around February 1st that she felt was worth raising in public. Laura Gargano sat down with Brian Entin for an episode of Brian Entin Investigates. She lives in proximity to Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills. She gave this interview on the record under her own name, on camera. That matters. In a case where so much significant detail has come from unnamed sources and anonymous tips, a named neighbor going on the record carries real weight. This is not speculation. This is a person who lives near a crime scene and chose to say what she knows in public. Here's what she told him.
There is a rental property near Nancy Guthrie's home. Laura knew it was a rental. She knew who had been there. Not personally, not intimately, but in the way you know someone in a neighborhood. The car in the driveway, the lights on or off, the presence that registers as a consistent fixture of your environment. And in the days immediately following Nancy's disappearance, in the immediate aftermath of February 1st, 2026, Laura noticed the car was gone. Not just absent for a day, gone. The property had gone quiet in a way that read to her as vacant. Laura was clear that she could not pinpoint exactly when the departure happened, whether it was before Nancy vanished or in the immediate days after. She did not claim certainty about the precise timing. She said the departure and the disappearance landed in the same narrow window, and that proximity, that overlapping of two events that registered as unusual, had been sitting with her since February. She brought it up unprompted. Brian Entin did not ask her about a rental property. He did not raise it, she raised it, which means it had been turning over in her mind for weeks. Something about the timing she could not reconcile with coincidence, something she felt strongly enough about to put on the record with a national investigative reporter. Laura also described what it does to a community to hear the sheriff say a woman was not randomly taken, she was targeted, and then admit he does not fully understand the nature of that targeting. Her exact words, "It did give me some time to think about what that means, and it made me a little bit uncomfortable being a nearby neighbor." That psychological weight is significant. You are left with the knowledge that someone came to your street with a plan, someone watched and waited and moved, and you do not know if whatever drew them there is gone, or if it is still present in some form. Laura's observation about the rental property exists inside that anxiety. One of several things she noticed, one of several things the neighborhood has been quietly cataloging since February 1st. What Laura described, taken on its own, is significant, but it does not stand alone. In about 60 seconds, I'm going to tell you what a retired SWAT expert said when he heard this kind of account, and why the operational logic of what he described maps directly onto this neighborhood. Stay with me. Brian Entin also spoke with Bob Kryger on day 66. Bob Kryger is a retired SWAT expert, not a pundit, not a television commentator with a credential, a man whose professional background is in tactical operations, in understanding how criminal actors plan and stage complex operations.
And Kryger raised something on the record that connects directly to what Laura described. An empty home near a crime scene, Kryger noted, could have served as a surveillance location. Let me break down what that means operationally. For a targeted abduction to succeed, and the abduction of Nancy Guthrie was, by every public indicator, successful in its execution, the people responsible needed information. They needed to know Nancy's routine. They needed to know the layout of the neighborhood. They needed to know when she was home, when she was alone, when the window of vulnerability existed. That kind of intelligence is not gathered from a distance. It requires proximity. It requires presence in or near the target area over a sustained period without raising suspicion. An empty home achieves that. A rental property achieves that even more effectively. Rental properties have inherent legitimacy. Someone lives there. They belong there. The car in the driveway is expected. Neighbors see a rental occupant as part of the landscape. They do not think twice about a light on at an unusual hour or someone leaving at odd times. In a neighborhood not accustomed to rentals, a new tenant might attract brief initial notice, and then they settle into the background. They become normal until they leave. Kryger's point is not that the rental property was definitely used as a surveillance location. He is raising the operational logic, the way a professional planning a targeted abduction would approach the problem of intelligence gathering. And the rental property near Nancy's home fits that operational logic in a way that is difficult to ignore. Think about the timeline. Nancy disappeared on February 1st. Laura Gargano noticed the rental was vacated in the days around that date. If someone had been using that property to conduct pre-operation surveillance, watching Nancy's movements, mapping the neighborhood's rhythms, identifying the right moment to move, February 1st might have been the culmination of that surveillance. The day the operation happened would also be logically the day that presence was no longer needed. The surveillance position would be abandoned. The car would be gone. We want to be precise here. This is analytical inference based on Kryger's expert framework applied to the verified facts Laura Gargano provided. We are not asserting this is what happened. We are presenting the framework that trained tactical experts use. And within that framework, the timing Laura described is not just notable. It is significant in a way that only becomes clear when you hear what comes next. I need to stop here because this is the moment I ask for your support. If you are still watching at this point, you understand why this case matters. You are following the details that most coverage walks past. You are the audience this channel was built for. Please hit subscribe right now. Hit like on this video. This channel has few subscribers. Every single person who subscribes changes what we can do and how many people this investigation reaches. And before we go on, I want to ask you something. Do you think the rental property Laura described and the FBI inquiry Brian Entin reported are about the same person? Drop your answer in the comments. I am reading every one. Now, the FBI has a second camera they have said nothing about, and that silence tells us something. There is a pattern in this investigation that the community following it has been tracking since early February. The pattern of things we know exist, things confirmed in the record that we are receiving no information about. The second camera.
Brian Entin has reported that there is a second camera in the vicinity of Nancy's home, a camera that captured footage from the relevant time window of February 1st, footage the FBI now has. His words, the FBI has images from other cameras on Nancy Guthrie's property. Remember, we first only saw images from the Google Nest camera. The FBI has that footage, and the FBI has said nothing public about what it shows. Nothing. In a case where a woman has been missing for over 2 months, where the sheriff has described the disappearance as a targeted abduction, where the family is publicly and desperately asking for information, the FBI has stayed silent about what a camera recorded on the day she disappeared. That silence is not neutral. FBI silence in an active investigation is strategic. It can mean they do not want to tip off the people responsible. It can mean they are using the footage to pursue leads they have not disclosed. It can mean they are building a case around information in that footage that they do not want surfacing publicly yet. Any of those explanations is possible. None of them is comfortable. What the silence tells us, read alongside everything else we know about this investigation, is that the FBI has information, real information, the kind that warrants sustained silence and continued presence in Tucson, the kind that may include leads about individuals in the immediate vicinity of Nancy's home around the time of her disappearance. Because if the second camera footage captured something, a car, a person, a license plate, activity near a specific property, the FBI's next step would be to pursue that lead quietly. They would ask questions in the neighborhood. They would try to identify vehicles and occupants. They would be particularly interested in anyone whose presence in the neighborhood began weeks or months before February 1st and whose presence ended around the same time. A rental property, a car that disappeared. The contractor thread, the vacant neighboring property, the rental Laura described, these are not isolated anomalies. They are describing a pre-operation environment. In about 60 seconds, I am going to show you exactly how they fit together, and then I am going to tell you what Brian Entin's source reported about what the FBI is already doing. Stay with me.
Before we get to the final connection, we need to acknowledge the other threads developing in parallel, because they provide essential context for how investigators are building their picture of what happened in the Catalina foothills. The first is the contractor thread. The question of who had legitimate access to the vicinity of Nancy's home in the weeks and months before her disappearance. Contractors, service workers, anyone whose professional presence in the area would have been unremarkable, but who would have had the opportunity to observe her routines. The FBI has been conducting door-to-door canvass work, asking neighbors about workers they remembered seeing. That is active, targeted investigative work. The second is the vacant neighboring property, a separate, unoccupied home in proximity to Nancy's house that has been noted as a potential secondary point of interest in the neighborhood layout. Now place both of those alongside Laura Gargano's rental property observation. An empty neighboring property, a rental that was abruptly vacated, a contractor canvass actively underway, a targeted abduction in a quiet, affluent neighborhood where people notice. When you put those together, you begin to see the shape of what investigators are working to reconstruct. Not a single suspicious person, not a single suspicious vehicle, the reconstruction of an environment, a pre-operation window, a period of time before February 1st during which someone or multiple people had access to the vicinity of Nancy's home. Presence that was unremarkable when it was happening, presence that only became significant in retrospect. Laura Gargano's observation fits inside this framework precisely. She is not describing an isolated anomaly. She is describing one data point in a cluster of anomalies that, taken together, paint a picture of a neighborhood that had been observed, possibly for an extended period, before February 1st. And now for the piece that connects all of it.
Here is what Brian Entin reported separately from his interview with Laura Gargano. Because Laura's account of the vacant rental property, as significant as it is standing alone, does not stand alone. Brian Entin, using a source he described as close to the investigation, reported that FBI investigators have been asking questions in the neighborhood about a resident who moved out before Nancy vanished. The FBI asking neighbors about someone who left before February 1st. I need to be precise about the sourcing here, because it matters. Entin's source on this FBI inquiry is unnamed. It is described as close to the investigation. This is single-source reporting, not corroborated by a second independent source as of the time this video was produced. We are treating it as a reported claim from a credible journalist with a documented sourcing track record on this case, and we are flagging the sourcing level so you can weigh it accordingly. But here is what we can say about the intersection. Laura Gargano, named, on camera, on record, identified a rental property near Nancy's home from which a resident departed in the days around February 1st. She noted that rentals are uncommon in that neighborhood. She noted the car was gone. Brian Entin's source separately reported that the FBI is asking neighbors about a resident who left before Nancy disappeared. Two independent data points about the same phenomenon, a departure from a nearby property proximate in time to the kidnapping, in a neighborhood where such departures stand out. If those two data points refer to the same property, and we are not asserting that they do, we are presenting the possibility, then Laura Gargano is not just a neighbor with an observation. She is a civilian witness who identified from the ground something that federal investigators are reportedly pursuing through active inquiry. Think about what the FBI asking neighbors about this departure means in operational terms. It means they have a lead. It means the departure did not pass unnoticed at the federal level. It means a name, or the beginning of a name, or a license plate, or a rental agreement is in play. The FBI does not conduct active neighborhood canvassing in a dead end. Active canvassing means active pursuit. It means there is something there. The connection between Laura's account and the FBI inquiry has not been drawn clearly in the public coverage of this case, not until now. We are drawing it now because this community deserves to see the full picture, not the individual pieces in isolation. Here is the full picture. Someone was in a rental property near Nancy Guthrie's home. That person or those people left. The timing of that departure overlaps with the window of her kidnapping. A named neighbor noticed it and felt strongly enough to go on record with a national investigative reporter. A retired SWAT expert has identified the operational significance of what such a property could represent in a targeted abduction scenario. And federal investigators are reportedly asking questions about exactly that kind of departure. This is not a loose thread. This is a thread with weight on both ends. We do not know where Nancy Guthrie is. 66 days into her disappearance, she has not been found. No arrests have been made, no suspect has been publicly named. The investigation remains active enough that the FBI is reportedly still canvassing this neighborhood, still asking questions about who was where and when they left. What we know is that the people around her, her family, her community, the neighbors like Laura Gargano who live with the knowledge of what happened on their street are not giving up, and neither is this channel. Here are the two questions I want you to answer in the comments. First, do you think the rental property Laura described and the FBI inquiry Brian Entin reported are about the same person? What in the evidence leads you to your answer? Second, if someone was using that rental as a surveillance position before February 1st, what does that tell you about how long the operation was planned, and what does it tell you about who had the operational knowledge to pull it off? Tell me below. This community connects things that the headlines miss, and on a case like this one, that matters. If you have any information about the Nancy Guthrie case, or if you know anything about a rental property in the Catalina Foothills area of Tucson that was vacated around February 1st, 2026, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Tip Line at 520-351-4900 or the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Your identity can be protected. A tip does not require you to testify. It requires only that you share what you know with the people whose job it is to bring Nancy home. Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten. The investigation is not over, and neither are we. Before you go, 3 things. That is all I am asking. 1. Subscribe to Evidence True Crime right now. 2. Like this video. 3. Drop your answer to the 2 questions in the comments. This channel has almost no subscribers. Every single person who subscribes changes what this channel can do. Every like tells YouTube this investigation deserves more reach. Every comment keeps the pressure on and the case visible. You watched to the end because you care about Nancy Guthrie. Please show it. Subscribe, like, comment. It costs you nothing. For this channel, it means everything. We will keep watching. We will keep reporting. And Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten.